Adam Rittenberg, ESPN.com, joins us now on 365 Sports. Craig Smoak, David Smoak here as we take you through this Monday afternoon into the evening, and it's 4:34. Adam is about to embark on getting away. Adam, are you allowed to do that anymore with all the stories that seem to still be lingering in college athletics?
Well, I'm leaving, and if they want to expand and they want to do media rights deals, have at it, because I won't really be reasonable for the next week. It's funny that you say that, because last year I was with my colleague Kyle Bonaguro. We were on a golf course in California on the third hole when I got a text from somebody about USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. So you're right. There really isn't much of an off season. A lot of these big stories have seemingly happened, sometime between now and August 1st. So I'm sure there will be news, but we have a wonderful and talented staff of colleagues, and they'll be just fine covering whatever happens over the next week.
Adam, I know that you, like many people, are fatigued by expansion and realignment talk and all that type of stuff. I was more, though, wanting to ask a question just in regards to Brett Yormark and what you think of the job that he's done in terms of trying to revitalize the Big 12, trying to freshen up the brand, and probably poking and prodding around in places that people don't necessarily like or are accustomed to, just the way that he's doing it a little bit more brazen. But just what have you kind of gathered around the college sports landscape, and what have you thought yourself about the way that he's come in, guns blazing, for better or worse, with the Big 12?
Yeah, I think he's what the Big 12 needed right now. It was a brand that needed some freshening up. It needed a bit more outward aggression and also some creativity. I mean, what they are doing with this Mexico, moving games across different sports into Mexico and trying that out, I really like that. That's creative. Are any of us going to say for sure it's going to work? No, but I like that they're giving it a shot, and it's something different. And so it's not just poking the Pac-12 and having obviously a very outward and public stance towards expansion. They're doing a lot behind the scenes to rethink how to improve the Big 12 brand. At a time when the Big Ten and the SEC are distancing themselves in revenue and interest level, I think he was definitely the right guy at the right time for the Big 12, given what that league had been through. So I don't have an issue with Brett's approach at all. I think it's been great for the Big 12. But it's not just about the expansion. I think it's some of the other things that are going on as well that maybe don't get as much attention as with, the possibilities for who might enter the league.
Adam, what were your thoughts when you heard what Greg Sankey said last week in D.C., which he all but just should have put Brett Yormark's name in his comments about how he goes about business and is not out there like stirring the pot?
Yeah, I mean, again, Greg's a career administrator in college athletics and has seen, most of these realignment pushes go on from behind closed doors, and they seem to just pop up right before they actually happen. So, Greg also, took shots at Kevin Warren. I think, anyone who sort of doesn't fall in line with the way that he wants to maybe approach things is maybe looked down upon a little bit from the SEC ivory tower. But I think it's just different approaches. It was kind of laughable, the comment about how, can't we all be done with expansion now that the SEC's gotten what they wanted?
Yep.
Now everybody else should that's just not how it works. And the Big 12 has every right to continue to look for creative ways to improve its membership. So, again, not really surprising. But different approaches, and Greg is obviously in a position of strength as the leader of the SEC.
What was of more interest to you last week? Was it the Big Ten releasing their schedules for next year with the LA schools included, or was it the SEC punting basically on trying to remodel their schedules for the same year and sticking with the 8 conference games, which obviously was a controversy depending on where you looked?
Right. Well, I think they were both interesting in different ways. When we knew the Big Ten's decision for 2024, they had to announce the schedule sooner or later. And I think what they did was pretty admirable for a number of reasons. Normally, when scheduling is announced, guys, the big thing is, well, it's the same for everybody because we have to project fairness. The Big Ten didn't do that. And I think they should be commended for it, because what they did is that they looked at the games that really needed to be played, and they talked to their members and said, which of these games are non-negotiable? which of these games could you live without every single year? Maybe you'll get them 3 out of every 5 years. And they crafted a scheduling formula where I think my favorite thing about it is that every matchup in the conference will occur at least twice in 4 years, once home and once away. So as someone who, since I started covering the Big Ten, the most relevant game across the 15 years that I've covered the league has been Ohio State and Penn State. That's not a protected game. I would love to see it protected, but even though it's not, guys, that game is going to occur at least 2 out of every 4 years, and probably more often than that, over the next 10 years. That's my guess. So I think that was a really good thing, especially when you're integrating new members, going from 14 to 16. The fact that every player, if they come through a Big Ten football program, will be able to play in every venue. Every school will make at least one trip to LA in the next couple of years. So I think, again, as somebody who enjoys seeing good football and seeing teams in the league play one another, I appreciated their approach. The SEC, I do think they'll get there in 2025, but I've been saying that for a number of years. I've been very publicly critical of their scheduling formula. SEC fans don't seem to care. They seem to like less SEC football for some reason instead of more SEC football. But I guess at the end of the day, I wasn't that surprised that they reached the decision that they did to remain at 8 games for 2024. Again, I don't think it serves SEC fans or players. Certainly doesn't serve the media partners as well as a 9-game schedule. But every time I bring up that point, a bunch of SEC fans tell me don't tell us how to feel about our football. So keep enjoying less. Keep enjoying less SEC football. I know Big Ten fans and Big 12 fans and Pac-12 fans will enjoy seeing each of their teams playing one another a lot more often.
It's interesting you say that about the SEC, and it's an amazing conference, their success, and but just football, but let's talk football. You don't tell us how to do this, and yet all you hear is them wanting to tell you how good they are. And they back it up, but it's like they invented the game of football.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's interesting to hear, and nobody's questioning that they're the top conference, and yet they still want that acknowledgement. It's kind of amusing to me because it's almost like they're shouting at the clouds. I mean, who's really questioning your dominance? But in this context, when I hear from fans of teams that have no shot of winning a national title, how staying at 8 games helps the league win a national, it's like, what does that matter for your team? Your team's never playing a bunch of teams in the other division. You're going 8, 10, 12 years without playing in a certain venue. That has nothing to do with winning a national championship. And I'm of the belief, I don't know how you guys feel, that if the SEC had been at 9 conference games, they would still win the national championship almost every year. Maybe 1 or 2 teams wouldn't have made the playoff, but even with that 9-game conference formula, the great teams are going to win national championships. The Georgias, the Alabamas, occasionally LSU, occasionally somebody else. That would still have been achievable, and it certainly would be achievable in the 12-team playoff format, which is why I think the SEC will get there, just not as soon as some of us would like.
Adam, as we get into Big 12 Media Days next month, there's obviously a lot of great storylines. Final year for the conference with Texas and OU. First year with the 4 new schools. What's a story, what's a personality, or what's a headline potentially when you think of the Big 12 right at the moment that stands out to you?
Well, I think that, for Texas, it's kind of if not now, when. Because they have, I think, a roster that is set up to win the Big 12 in their final year of the deal of being in the conference, but they haven't won in so long, and they haven't performed in some of those big games. But you look at who they have coming back on offense, who they have coming back on defense, some of the transfers that they added into their program. There's a lot of pressure, but a lot of excitement around Texas to see if they can win the Big 12, because then you transfer to the SEC. It may be even longer before Texas wins another conference title. And if it's not Texas, who is it going to be? Is it going to be Kansas State again? Is it going to be TCU if they can reload? They lose a lot of really good players. Can Baylor rise up and be a contender again 2 years after winning the league? What about Oklahoma? Should be a better team in year 2 under Brett Venables. Can they be a Big 12 contending team? Certainly possible. And then you never know with the teams coming into the league. History has shown that when you move from one conference to another, you're likely not a contender in that new league right away. So, but UCF's got talent. Obviously, BYU has a lot of talent, but I think for me, it's Texas. Can they actually win the Big 12 with what I believe is the best roster in the conference before transitioning on? And I should also mention Texas Tech. Texas Tech has a team with all those returning starters, and Tyler Shuck just named the quarterback again. Joey McGuire's very bullish on his team. Can they take that jump like Baylor has taken, like Kansas State has taken, like others have taken to challenge in the Big 12, or are they going to be more in that 8 or 9 win range?
Adam, your thoughts about last week? There's always, every week, something does seem to flare up or someone reports something, and it's become a turf war with the Pac-12, the media rights, and even those, the Big 12 has their side too. But there was a report that some administrator had told a reporter out of Oregon, I guess John Canzano, that they would beat the Big 12's number. Also, that happened, I think, a day or two after the story came out about they had already signed the grant of rights. And the first question we had was, why would you do that if you don't know the details?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you don't sign the grant of. I mean, nothing has happened until the numbers have been presented. And I think what Washington State's president said last week at their Regents meeting is probably accurate, which is it going to be a number that's way above where they're at now? No. Is it going to be a number that's way below where they're at now? No. Is it going to be something that's mostly flat? Probably. And so what then do the teams that could have a Big 12 outlet do at that point? Do they remain in the Pac-12? Do they sign what will be a short grant of rights deal, a 5 or 6 year deal? Or do they make that move and accept, obviously, the invitations that have been very publicly extended by the Big 12? But even sources I've talked to at Colorado, which is clearly the likeliest existing Pac-12 school to jump to the Big 12, said, why would we do anything until we see the numbers and really decide what's best for us in the future? So that's going to happen at some point. I think what I think last time we were on it, we talked about this, that if in a normal media negotiation timeline, we are approaching the time of year that you would typically have a media deal done. What's different here is that the Pac-12 opened up those negotiations so early, and it's taken so long to present concrete numbers to the membership to then either sign a grant of rights and stay together, or in some cases look to leave the conference.
Would it have been as big a story, or would it be as big a story had the Big 12 not extended back when they did back in October?
No, yeah, absolutely, it wouldn't have been as big. I mean, that certainly amplified it and created more tension around the Pac-12. I mean, you wonder now in hindsight, what if the Pac-12 had never opened its negotiations early? Would the Big 12 have followed? Maybe the Big 12 would have anyway, and still reached the deal that it got. But the fact that the Pac-12 did open those negotiations, the Big 12 soon followed, got its deal done so quickly, and now we're still sitting here on June 12th and without an announcement from the Pac-12 it certainly created more tension around that conference.
You wrote a story about Deion. It's back in March, and obviously that's 3 months ago, nearly 2.5 months ago. What are your thoughts now, 2.5 months later? I know they got a couple of nice commitments in the last 24 hours. The way he's worked at least his first few months in Boulder.
Well, it hasn't been boring, and I think they have certainly turned over such a big portion of the roster. They've created a lot more hype around their program. They're attracting recruits and some transfers, not a ton, but some transfers that they wouldn't have been able to in the past. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it evolves when we have results, when we have games to judge Colorado on. It's obviously a tough schedule, as you guys know, beginning with TCU, featuring USC and Oregon in the month of September, also Nebraska, Colorado State. So I think how they start the season is going to be fascinating, but it's clear that Colorado and Deion's message are reaching recruits that wouldn't have considered Colorado for the most part a year ago. Now, I would say this: Colorado has added good players in recent years. All you have to do is look at some of the NFL drafts. Christian Gonzalez, top 10 pick, was a Colorado recruit. He ended up transferring to Oregon and blowing up there as a cornerback. So there have been some good players in there. I think the real challenge for Deion and his staff, in talking to some of their coaches, I've seen them at some recruiting camps lately, they have to bring this team together very quickly. A lot of new players, They have to learn the system. They have to figure out how to become a team in much less time than most teams do. They essentially have, I wouldn't say lost half the off season, but most of the players were not there in the spring. And so they're going to have to figure out a way to come together and learn their systems and ultimately be ready to play on September 2nd against TCU and throughout that month. Because I think that if they're not, the narrative around Colorado will change pretty dramatically.
Hey, Adam, have a great vacation no matter what else happens over the next few days. Enjoy it. Play a little golf, get some fresh air, smell the roses. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Smokey. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Adam Rittenberg, ESPN.com with us on 365 Sports.